Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Today we're going to talk about postcards. And I'm going to talk about postcards, but I'm going to discuss the Jewish stereotype as they are on postcards. Many of us, unfortunately, believe that anti-Semitism began with the Nazis, and we'll see that it didn't. A little bit about myself. I'm an assistant analyst and programmer by profession. I'm also an author, and you can check me out on Amazon. I wrote a book called Kill Me Now. I'm also an official gymnasium trainer. I did that when my mother was very, very ill. I wanted to help her. And well, she's since passed on, so I wasn't very good help. And I'm a blogger. And I have a YouTube channel. And of course, I need more subscribers. So please, everyone, try and subscribe. I need more guys. Both my blog and my YouTube are all the stories behind the stamps and not exactly the stamp itself. And you should check it out. Apart from that, in Ibra, I just got my first FIP large gold in thematics. And I'm very happy, very happy. Now, I spoke about postcards, and postcards, I have to say that I say it very often that I don't like postcards. When I was, the postcard exhibiting postcards is relatively new. It started, I think it's only FIP since 2018. It started in New Zealand and Australia, and they got the ball going. And from there, it went to places like Belgium and Holland and that area, because people are more and more interested in postcards. Personally, I always looked down on it because how can someone know rarity? It's not like the sale. It's not like a stamp. It's a catalog for it. So I didn't really connect to this. And one day, a friend of mine, very good friend of mine, who's not here today with us, he said to me, please write an article about the Jewish stereotype. So I said, okay, fine. I know the subject matter. I'll write it. And I started looking for philatelic material, and there's almost nothing. And I thought, you know what, if there's nothing, I wrote the article with whatever there was, and I said, okay, but that being the case, let me check out postcards, because I know there are a lot of Nazi postcards. It turns out that there are not that many Nazi postcards, and more of them are way before, from the 1890s, and we'll see examples today. So when I approached the Oficina to ask if they wanted me to give a presentation, they said to me, there's somebody who's asking about this new postcard category in FIP. And here we can see that this is the criteria. There are 30 points for the idea, the plan, the treatment, 35 for knowledge and research, and we'll soon understand what that's about. And condition 10, rarity 20, and don't ask me how they measure rarity, because a postcard is a marketing tool. You use it to as marketing. So you send out many of them, or else you prepare many of them. How do you know what rarity is? And according to the guidelines, rarity today is basically difficult of acquisition. Again, the question is, what's difficulty of acquisition? Because when I was in Ibra, there was a place that they were doing that you could go, a special booth that you could go to, and they could say to them, okay, I want the picture taken, and they put on a postcard. And I made 10 of those. Is that rare? There's only 10 in existence. Of those, when they were printing them, 2 of them were inverted. So I can say the 2 of them inverted. The only 2 inverted postcards known. Is that rare? Not so much, because it's very, very modern. It's 2023. So the question is how they really define rarity. And they do say difficult of acquisition. If you go onto eBay, for example, and you search for a certain item and you won't come across any of them, and you'll see some examples of that here, you can say that's relatively rare. But on the other hand, if you see something that comes up over and over and again in auctions, the chances are it's not as rare as you thought. If I take, for example, another idea about a postcard is that postal stationery is not a postcard. If I have, for example, a typical example of during the Nazi period, there was a postcard that brought out for an exhibition called Der ewige Jude, the Eternal Jew. And that exhibition was in 1937 and 1938. Now, it's normally with an imprinted stamp on it, a 5 pfennig or something like that. And once it's imprinted, it makes it postal stationery. Therefore, although it's a postcard, it's invalid in the postcard category. The only one of the ewige Jude that is valid is the one that was printed in Vienna. And I'm not going to show you an example of that here today because I'm going to focus on pre-Nazi postcards. Now, when we talk about postcard, one of the main things is research. The English term for it is deltiology. And we'll soon talk about what research is. When you talk about research, you have to try and understand who the publisher is. And it's not so easy to find out. The artist or the photographer, because many people in the late 1890s, early 1900s took photos of areas and they prepared them as a postcard. The printing method, obviously, as printing got better and better, the printing methods got better and better. In the early years in the United States and in some cases England, the printing process wasn't so good. So they used to send it to Germany to have the postcards printed. So you'll see a lot of postcards that are published in England or in America, but actually printed in Germany. So you have to try and understand which is which. And of course, the printing date. Now, the printing date is one of the most difficult parts, and we'll see one way to understand how it is. Because by using the printing date, you want to know. You have to give that kind of information for the judges, for example. And for me personally, all this information is what makes postcards interesting. Here we have an example of a postcard, and this postcard we'll see later. And we see here, I don't know if I can, here, you see the scribble over here? You have to understand what that scribble is, what this scribble is, and what this is basically about. And that's what the research comes in. If I have a look at this, and I see that this scribble is actually the name of the artist. And you have to understand that the name was Frederick L. Cavalli, Leopold Cavalli. In this case, it was Frederick Leopold Cavalli Jr., something I just discovered tonight. So that's how you can understand the artist. But first you have to understand that this is the artist and not the publisher. At the bottom, we have this, and it says here, FAMOSS. But it's actually not FAMOSS, or famous is what I thought. It's FAMOS. So this is the kind of information that you should try and find out in order to show to the judges that you have done some research. Here I'm actually basically stuck because as far as my research is concerned, I know that FAMOS was in Denver, Colorado. But what does FA stand for? What does A stand for? I haven't yet found out. Now, this is the first postcard that was ever handed out. Now, in 1868 or whatever, somebody by the name of Dr. Herman, Emanuel Herman, who was a professor of economics in Vienna, he said, "This is ridiculous. I'm charged a single rate for every time I want to send out a letter. All I want to say in the letter is, please come to my office at 2:00 tomorrow. Why do I have to put it into an envelope or whatever, seal it, go to the post office and send it to them? I want a simple method. And he presented his idea to the Austrian Post, and they accepted it. And came out that in 1st of October 1869, the first postcard was authorized, but it wasn't used then. The first postcard was issued almost a year later in 1970. And we see here, and this is a typical example of what a postal station is. The value 2 kronen is imprinted on the postcard. It's basically not valid in a postcard exhibit, although it is one of the first postcards. Now, the UPU, established in 1874, which was a few years later, they took into account all of these, and they said, okay, they defined the postage rates or the amounts for mail delivery between countries. Within your country, you could charge however you want to. But when you send it out of the country, it has to be delivered in that other country. So somehow somebody has to pay the other country for delivering it in that country. The UPU defined these rates. And they just said that the cost of sending a postcard would be half that of sending a letter. Why half? I can understand the logic. There's less to do. You know exactly what it is. It's less writing. It's not heavy. You always know the weight, always know the size in this case. And comes out okay. But before then, all you had was official postcards until the private printing houses were allowed to come in. And that was only in about 1890. And then all hell went loose. In those days, and we'll see what I mean by all hell went loose in a few moments, the back, on the other hand, was meant purely for the address. And here we see the back of the postcard, and you can see that it was sent here, and it's only for the address. So we see many postcards of this period in which the writing, that the message itself was on the actual picture. Now this changed in 1905, and it became official in 1906. And this is something that that people understand. It's called an undivided back. An undivided back means that the whole back was supposed to be used for the address, not the message. And only in 1906 was it divided into two. Now we go to the subject of today. As I said to you earlier, the hatred to anti-Semitism did not start with the Nazis. It's the world's oldest hatred. As far as the Bible is concerned, we see it in the story of Esther, in which Haman wanted to eradicate or perform genocide on the entire Jewish race. And that's how far back it goes. And even in the times of the Greeks, there was a lot of hatred against Jews, basically because Jews were different. As an example to show the hatred, and you'll see some postcards in a moment, but the Greeks believed in athletics. And as you all know, the marathon comes from Greek times. And in those days, over 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, whatever, sports was done naked. And one of the customs of the Jewish religion and the Muslim religion is that we have a circumcision almost at birth, 8 days after birth. And people, the other athletes used to look at the Jewish athletes and scorned them. They didn't like it because they are different. And in 1879, a German journalist, as you can see, William Marr, he gave the name anti-Semitism for Jewish hatred. He said it sounds more scientific. Now, if people say, why the Jews? Because also Arabs are Semites. Why only the Jews? And his comment was, Jews speak many, many languages. They're very, very learned. And They speak many of the Semitic languages. So I'll use anti-Semitism because it is scientific meaning. Now, here's a postcard from 1920s showing a phrase by Seneca. Now, who was Seneca? Seneca was a Greek philosopher, a Roman philosopher, sorry, who lived between 4 BC and 65 AD. And he said, the customs of this wicked people, the Jews, have already become so strong that they have spread to all countries. The vanquished have imposed their laws on all the victors. Now, what was he referring to, though, in those? He was referring to the 10 Commandments. Do not kill, do not steal. And those are the customs that he was against. He actually referred to us as the criminal race. Now, here we're going to deal with more postcards, and we're going to talk about the fact that we were unwelcome in many places. Now, why? Charles Dickens wrote a book called Oliver Twist. Now, the figure called Fagin was an evil person. Not only was he evil, but he was also very vicious and used to train thieves to be pickpockets. Now, Charles Dickens, and the book was written about in the 18th century, 19th century, sorry, the 1800s. And he said if someone was going to be as wicked as Fagin, it could only be a Jew. And he also referred to us as a criminal race. He also said that Fagin was the old man, which the old man was a reference to the devil. I don't know how many of you have read Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. I've actually also seen the movie. You can't really see from the movie that there's anti-Semitism in there, but you can see it in the book. Now, this is actually very strange because in that time, there were not that many Jews living in England. Jews had only been allowed to return in 1690, and this was written in the early 1800s. I spoke about circumcision earlier, and here we see a circumcision act in Algeria. This postcard is in the French at the top says a little retouch, just a little retouch, and you can see here the evil mohel. We'll call it a mohel. When someone does a circumcision with his huge scissors, come to snap off the poor guy's little thing, and he was screaming pain. Now, Neri, is it Neri? Can't see it. Sorry, it's Herzog. Edward Herzog was actually a Frenchman who drew pictures for the Algerian Post. So this actually was sent in 1916. Now, this postcard, Jean, this is a postcard I'm looking for. It shows that we eat matzah. On Passover, which is another of the problems, we have a custom that we don't eat bread, unleavened bread, because of what happened when we had to leave Egypt thousands of years ago. And here it is here, actually translated, the pie face, and you can see the evil-looking Jew. Now, when I said to you that it's difficult to find out information, at the bottom here, I know the date it was issued, 1905, but who is JA and AA? I have not found any information in any of the books anywhere what JA and AA stands for. I've even just today I bought a book called A Guidebook of Collectible Postcards, written by three American postcard collectors, and they don't even mention this publisher. And I've got quite a few postcards about this. Let's continue. One thing is that we don't eat pork, and that was something else that the Greeks had against us. That we sat at the same table with them, and we wouldn't eat the same food because we wouldn't eat pork. Now, even today, many of my religious or not, they won't touch pork. my brother and sister are not religious, but pork is not something that they will eat. And in Germany, as you can see here in 1900, they're very much against the fact that Jews did not eat pork. And we can see here 3 Jews dressed as people, but looking like pigs. Unfortunately, this is not mine. I was seen it in a sort of auction, and this is how we talk about rare and not rare. I've only seen it in 2 auctions. One auction, I put it in for a bid for 120 euro, and I didn't get it. It was sold at 150 euro. And I have seen it sold for less, but obviously I've only seen 2 or 3 in auctions. So I'm still hoping for it. But this one will come across very lately. We can see here on the right here, and let's see, I'll come back, previous. This little guy here is the Jew. We can know he's a Jew because he's also got the skull cap and the long nose, but he's dressed as a pig. Now, the matter of honor comes up with, this was a French artist. It's very difficult to find his name, but his name is in the bottom corner here. And he's showing here a matter of honor. And this postcard, this picture was used also for a department store in 1905. We don't exactly know when this postcard itself was published, because it doesn't have a date, and it's got a divided back. Kulnerhof in Maine. Now, Kulnerhof in Maine was headed by a known anti-Semite. His name was Herman Loss, and he prided himself on his hotel as being the only hotel in Frankfurt that is totally Jew-free. And you can see here a Jew wanted to come in, and we'll soon see how we know that's a Jew. And he's pointed to a sign here, Juden ist der Eintritt. In other words, Eintritt verboten. In other words, entry to Jews is forbidden. And this is in 1998. It's 1898. And when I said to you before earlier that when private people were allowed to print postcards and all hell broke loose, you can see that a few years later, this hotel and restaurant printed their own postcard. Now, they actually handed out for free as marketing. And this one I do have. I did pay too much for it, but I do have this postcard. I got it very recently. And it's a picture of the town hall. Exactly the same hotel. And here we can actually see a Jew being kicked out of the hotel. And once again, Herman prided himself on being the only non-Jewish hotel in Frankfurt. It's the island of Bulkum. The island of Bulkum is in the north part of Germany, in Saxony. It's an island, and they also pride themselves on being a totally Jewish-free island. We can see here the Jews were not on the island, but here we see trying to get into the hotel, the restaurant, and the Jews. The mention here said those people who have flat foot have no right to enter. Why they said flat foot, I don't know, but that's how they said it. Now, the whole thing is the Bulkum Lied here. It's a very, very anti-Semitic song. And they at the hotel and the restaurants, they were singing it. They sang it all over Bulkum, but it was stopped only in the 1940s. Now, if you thought it would only happen in Germany, you're wrong. Because this is a picture in Cape Cod in the United States, which is supposed to be our best friend. And this is also, in a way, anti-Semitic. And how we know it's anti-Semitic? Because it says here, carefully restricted community. Carefully restricted was code name for white non-Jews. And this actually a photo taken The postcard itself was issued in the 1920s, and it was also issued free of charge for marketing purposes. Another thing, and once again, you can see here, private beach. You can see here the wording private beach. Now, the Miami Beach in Florida was established by an entrepreneur, wealthy entrepreneur, obviously, and he said he wanted to bring all his wealthy Caucasian friends to join him in the area, directly on the beach. That he only wanted people, his friends, his colleagues, people who are the same as him, to enjoy that. And when they said they wouldn't sell to anybody else who was not totally white and non-Jewish. We see the same thing with the hotel, but here on the other side, we see here every appointment designed to meet requirements of discriminating clientele. In other words, in order for you to go into the hotel, you had a meeting to see whether you are worthy. And obviously, Jews were not accepted. Now, here we can see exodus of the Jews. This is a postcard from Vienna from the early 1900s, 1905, I believe. And the idea here is homunculus. Now, homunculus is a small man. It comes from the Latin, a small man, a miniature, not a dwarf, but a small person. And the idea was that it came from the golem, the Jewish golem of I forgot the name of the city in Prague, and he was small and whatever, and I couldn't work out why else would they talk about small Jews, because many Jews are not small, they're regular size. You can't say he's a Jew because he's small. And I found out that there was a story that was going around in Germany and Austria called Der kleine Cohen, the small Cohen. And here we can see when this poor little guy was on the bottom left here, when he tried to enlist, they all laughed at him because he was so small. And this was one single person, and many postcards have been issued showing this poor little guy. They are quite difficult to get. I haven't been able to get this one like this in good condition, but there's a lot of jokes about Der kleine Cohen. And it's also not mine. This postcard's also not mine, unfortunately, but we can see here nach Palästina, and we see here the Juden. Basically, the German here says, let's expel them all to Palestine, then close the doors, and Europe will be totally free. And this is from 1900. So in those days, the idea of the Germans and in 1880, a German party started getting the idea of getting rid of all the Jews. And in those days, they were saying Jews go to Palestine. Now today, they're saying Jews get out of Palestine. Unfortunately, I took this from the website. I missed it on the stat site. Hopefully, next time we have something similar. Now we'll talk about the stereotype, the way we look. Here we see a postcard from 1905 issued by F.S. Bacchus, and we see here what the Jewish nose looked like. This is basically exactly what the Jewish nose is supposed to look like in the eyes of people who talk about it. Now, how do I say what the people who talk about it? The Nazis in their race protocols of 1935 of Nuremberg, they actually said what a Jewish nose should look like. It should be a hooked nose, it's curved, and basically that's what it is. Now, this is 30 years before they came out with their declaration. The Nazis themselves, actually very funny, but they used to go to people who looked German, and they used to measure the size of their noses to make sure whether they were German or not. But this postcard is a part of a series. And we see here two stereotypes. And the series is of about 505, and that of different people. As you can see here, this marking here, 718, the bottom here means it's part of a series. And in those, sometimes we have a Chinaman on the side and somewhere else on the side. There are a few different ones, and they're not easy to come by. Now, we saw this, if you have a look at the bottom here, we saw this insignia of the artist, and here's how you drew the Jewish nose. Now, why did Frederick Leopold Cavalry draw this? He was born in Kansas, Ohio. There were no Jews around him, but apparently his grandparents were German. So maybe that's why he drew them like that. But he was trying to draw a comic caricature. And that's what he likes to do. He has another example of his work drawn out by somebody else, by F.A. Moss. Once again, same insignia. You saw previously that I showed you this example at the bottom here. I do have a better copy of this, but you can see that the same kind of nose. And here we have him once again. And you can see him with it. Got a bit of an evil look, this guy, but he's saying, well, why don't you write? In a kind of Yiddish way. The Jewish nose was so strong that in Hanoi Bay, they even named a structure called the Jew. If you see it here, why do they call it the Jew? Because this man here, if you can see the cursor, looks like a man with a large Jewish nose. And that was in the guidebooks. Now, this was printed long before it became Vietnam. Today, once it became Vietnam, they took off the name, the Jew, and they made it the man, the head of the man. That's how strong the idea is of a Jewish nose. Now, I'm going to talk about our horns. And before I talk about our horns, it's a bit of a story to tell you. Because I was born in a country called Rhodesia, and I went to public school, and I had many friends there. And one day, a friend of mine asked me to help him prepare for an exam, and I said gladly. And I brought him home. And my father came home at about 5 o'clock from work, and he was very tired. My friend was still there because we were still studying. And my friend looked at my father and said to me, when is Lawrence going to grow his horns? And where are your horns? My father looked at me and said, what is he talking about? And I said, I don't know. I said to my friend, what are you talking about? He said, it's well known that all Jews have horns. I said to him, you know what? I don't know what you're talking about, but please leave our home. I really didn't speak to him then again, but I didn't understand what he was referring to. I forgot about that until my good friend asked me to talk about the Jewish stereotype. Now, the question is, where does this come from? It comes from Exodus 34:35, an incorrect translation. The Hebrew says, Moshe lo yada ki karan or panav uvra'o ito. What does it basically mean? It means Moses' face was radiant because it had spoken with God. But this word here, karan and or, can also be translated as horns on his face. And that's how it was translated. Now, if you have a look at the picture of the Michelangelo statue of the Moses, we see horns on his face, on his head. And that's how Michelangelo even then did the sculpture. And we see that very blatantly here. Unfortunately, this postcard of mine is broken. There's a bad break here. And this is the only one I have seen. So it's pretty rare. So I can't put it in my exhibit. But on the other hand, we have a look at this little guy again. We can see the horns on his head here. So it's quite prominent in the idea that Jews have horns. Basically, people in some stage, people thought it was because the devil. If you remember correctly, I spoke about Fagin, and people said that he was the old man, and the old man was a name for the devil. And basically, this is kind of looks like a devil. And if you have a look at the shadow, it does look a bit like the devil. Distorted bodies. I don't know where this came out, but we can see here a postcard from 1920s. At the bottom here, it's written a grand bazaar, just like in Paris. And we can see there the distorted body of the Jew. And this was done by Philip Neri, who was actually French, and he painted also he was Swiss, and he painted for Algerians. And this postcard was also from the 1920s. Not the only thing that the distorted bodies. Here we have another example. And I don't know if anybody can actually stand like that. It looks painful for me to even just look at it. But we see here a lot of the stereotypes. Jews in Germany, or Marienbad was actually a Czechoslovakian spa town. There are a few of them, and one of them was Marienbad, and many of them were Jews. And they used to go there with the top hats, umbrellas, just like a British, shall we say it, posh person. And the idea was to show that even the Jews could dress up as posh people or regular people, even with the umbrella, they would still look basically alien. This person claiming that all Jews have side locks. You can see the peot and the peot's side lock and his head. Now, this painter Thieli is well known for printing caricatures of animals, but people as animals. And this is how he decided to depict a Jew. And this is also from the 1915s, something like that, just after the outbreak of the war. And once again, this is very rare. I've only seen two of these, one and one other. And of course, as you've seen quite a few times, we speak Yiddish. Ach, wees mir. And if you walk around in New York and whatever, and you say, ach, wees mir, it's not strange to people in New York. Many people know that. It's well known all over the world. And once again, this JA and AA. But it's not the only case. There are many postcards showing that either we speak Yiddish, not English, or we speak English with an accent, as in why not? And if you remember that previously, I showed you an example with the one for God, and he said, well, why don't you write? This is also that it's because this is with a undivided back, he had to write the message here. Now we can see the way we behave. I just want to see if I've got enough time. Am I boring anybody? Is it Mr. Hurry Up? No comments? I'll continue. Okay. We are considered to be greedy. The Merchant of Venice. Merchant of Venice was written in the 1590s, and it's a story about Shylock, who was a moneylender, and he learned somebody who knew him, a person by the name of Antonio, come to ask him for money, and Shylock didn't want to give him any money simply because Antonio had hit him. He'd spoken badly about him. He'd been spoken badly about his Jewish religion, and he really didn't want to give him money. And Antonio begged him, and he said, "Okay, you know what? But if you default, I want a pound of flesh." Now, what do I mean by a pound of flesh? It means this: I give you an arm or whatever, and that's basically a pound of flesh. And Antonio said, "No problem, I'll do it." And unfortunately, Antonio defaulted on his loan. And Shylock was very angry with Antonio, Why was he angry with Antonio? Not because he had spat on him or hit him or whatever, but because Antonio's friend had run off with Shylock's daughter, and she converted to Christianity. So he wanted his pound of flesh. And it was a very bad story, and he did anything possible to get his money back. He didn't care who he hurt. Now, the story that Shylock was Jewish and he was not a very nice person, and Shakespeare then said that if someone was that bad, he had to be a Jew. Now, why? Why is a question that everybody asks. The question is, okay, the Merchant of Venice was written about 1595, 1596, and Jews had been expelled from England in 1290, and were not 1230, sorry, and were not allowed to return until 1690 when Oliver Cromwell let them in. So there was over a few hundred years in which there was not a single Jew in England. So how was it that he hated Jews so much? And I haven't yet come out with an answer. I have found information. Somebody said today that maybe Shylock was actually a Jew himself. That Shakespeare was a Jew himself. He knew a lot of the Talmud, he knew a lot of the practices and whatever. I haven't yet authenticated that information. So your choice whether you believe it or not. Here we see all the negative characteristics. We see here the flag, meaning the flag is our money, the money, our friend, our enemy, our flag, our gold, old silver, and we see here a Jew with the what we call the Eastern European Jewish look, in which they have the hooked nose, the look, and whatever. Even the Germans used to call it the Ostjuden, the Eastern Jews, people who had already come from Eastern Germany. And here we see a postcard from Germany when a Jew is sitting on top of all his money bags, and you can see how it's 30,000 marks, 30,000 marks. This is actually in the early 1920s when there was the great inflation in Germany. A schnorrel, as we see here, is a beggar. And the idea is that Jews are always looking for money. And we take advantage. And we see the Jew here, money to loan, money lenderer, at only 10% per month. And once again, this is from the early years, the 1905. You can see that the message was written on the front here. And people believed that Jews would take advantage of them, charging high interest. Now, the idea that came from that Jews were loaned money or were pawnbrokers, or were money loaners, actually came from the Middle Ages, when jobs were taken. Jews were not allowed to hold many jobs. They were not allowed to be doctors. They were not allowed to be carpenters. And they were not allowed to do many jobs. The one thing that they were allowed to do was to loan money, because in some countries, loaning money, if a Christian was to loan money or Catholic was to loan money, they were not allowed to charge interest. So people didn't want to do that. And people took loans from Jews. Actually, even the kings took loans from Jews. And during the Crusades, when they couldn't repay them, they simply killed the Jews that they owed money to and stole the land. But that's how the idea of money loaning started. Here we see another example of a pawnbroker. And how do we know that it's a pawnbroker, that it's a Jewish pawnbroker? Because many cards make fun of Jewish names. We are all called either Levi or Cohen or Strauss or Frankfurter for that example. But we can see here that the name of the pawnbroker is Cohen. That's how we know that it's talking about a Jew. Now, basically, this poor person looking for money to buy his wife some flowers or something like that. In the early 20s, in France, this is a postcard from France, there were elections held from 1924. The elections were held for the Chamber of Deputies, and the Chamber of Deputies, there was one party that said they wanted to get out all the people who profited from the Great War. In other words, the First World War. In those days, it wasn't called World War I because World War II hadn't yet happened. So it was called the Great War. And we basically see that the profiteers were all Jewish looking. And they just wanted to get, all the workers wanted to get out the Jews from wherever they could. And of course, we control the banks. Now, the Pfund Frankfurterin was basically the 5 Frankfurters, was basically a play on the Rothschild brothers, who had set up a successful series of banks in Europe. And there were people very, very jealous. And if you have a look at them, each of the 5 brothers, they each have, well, put it this way, they've got smug looks. Not a very pleasant thing. And this is, when you talk about the Pfund Frankfurter, and there's a few postcards like this, they all refer to these 5 brothers. And once again, this is also very difficult to come by. There's another postcard that I don't have, which is also difficult. And here we have the greedy. We have all the money in the world. On the right-hand side, we see that a Jew has all the money in the world. And the left-hand side, we see, but we still hold the purses. And we control the world. Here we see a Jew with the claws. He's got a demonic look. And this is actually printed by the Anti-Semitic Library in France. There's quite a few of them. And Lieu Patrie means our homeland. In other words, the whole world is our homeland. We're controlling the whole world. This is also 1905. Gazelles is the misers. I'm keeping all the money to myself. It's basically the same as being greedy. And this is something brought. I'm no Scotchman, I'm no Jew, but I draw the line sometimes. Now, why is he saying that? Because you're being asked to give money to the toilet. This postcard is British. It's from a company called Bramforth & Co. Now, Bramforth & Co. started up in the early 1900s. The company itself was established in about 1870 by James Bamworth, and they made what they call sexist postcards, normally at the beach. But they also had a lot of anti-Semitic postcards. And basically, we all know that the Scotchmen are not very, are some quite often misers, but they're also saying that Jews are also misers. And believe me, now, if someone were to, if someone were to come up to me and say to me, believe me, with a smoking a cigar like that, I don't believe I would believe him either. We're not trustworthy. Now, here's another item about being not trustworthy, but we also refer to here as the enemy. We see here in French, le juif, voilà l'ennemi. Now, this came out even before the Dreyfus case. And we see here Panama. Now, the story here, actually, Jews are depicted here as a dragon. Now, why are we depicted here? Why Panama here? And why are Jews referred to as the enemy? In those days, the Panama Canal was being built. And a lot of people were being asked to invest in the Panama Canal. And there were some French companies who were also being, French people who were also being asked to invest. And there was a few people that were trying to get people to invest, and 2 of them were Jews. And unfortunately, the money that they invested got lost. Everyone went bankrupt, but they accused the Jews. Even though the Jews were only 2 of the 10 members there, they said that they were the enemy. And that was the original Panama affair. And of course, Dreyfus, we see here the Museum of Horrors, and we call the traitor, the Dreyfus case. Now, Dreyfus here has been depicted as, it's not exactly a snake, it's called a hydra. And the hydra has many heads, and the other heads are a snake. Unfortunately, this is also something I don't have. Not mine. When I say not mine, it's a hint. If any of you see them for me, please let me know. I don't have that much money, but we'll see. And it's still going on. We can see here a postcard brought out by the Egyptian in Egypt. We see here an Israeli soldier, but the bottom here we see the same Jewish characteristic here: the hooked nose, the beard, and we can see here that it's a Jew. Now this is basically the Dome of the Rock, and the Israeli soldier there is saying no more tunnels. And the claim is that even while he's speaking, we're building tunnels underneath there. In other words, he's saying that we're not only that, but we're also liars. In essence, postcards do tell us a story where stamps cannot. And as you can see, didn't start with the Nazis. And if any of you see anything for me, please let me know. I'm preparing for the Romanian exhibition. I'm only doing a single frame for now. I don't believe I'll be able to do multi-frame with this. That's why I called this exhibit or presentation a glimpse into the Jewish stereotype, just to give a taste of what's out there. Anyway, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, so if any of you have any questions for Lawrence or comments, please raise your hand. In the meantime, I do have a question. First of all, again, Lawrence, very nice presentation.
Thank you.
Is it difficult to obtain I assume that for the age of some of those postcards, those are really difficult, but in general, is it difficult to obtain this type of material for like the one that you just presented us today?
Yes and no. Why do I say yes and no? Because if you go into Del Camper, you'll find a lot of them. If you go into eBay, you'll find a lot of them. There are other companies that do that, but not everyone describes it as being anti-Semitic or whatever, because sometimes the message there, when you talk about a Jew with a big nose, for example, that was a caricature. So people can say it's anti-Semitic or it's not anti-Semitic. It's supposed to be a caricature. So I'm not going to describe it as being like that. But there are a lot of these postcards that are definitely available if you go to a postcard dealer. Because some people won't load it to the website, because some of them, they'll say, okay, it's only worth $2 to $3. If you have a look at the ones I showed you about Miami Beach or what those ones, they're basically simple postcards. And how many are going to put them and charge you $2 to $3? It doesn't pay you to put it on eBay. So that will only be found if you go through a dealer's list going there. And I basically only in America for American postcards, Europe or whatever. So for that kind of thing, it is difficult. But everything I've picked up to now, it's from basically finding on auctions, eBay, basically those are the kind of things. There are some sites that deal with postcards. I've only been dealing with this for 1 year. That's it. Everything I've done has been within a year. And the amount of material that's available, there's a lot of material available, strangely enough. But the idea, the fun part about all this is once you've got the postcard, finding the research. Because, as philatelists, as exhibitors and whatever, that's where the fun is. You want to build it. And when you find the information, yay!
Thank you. Another question regarding that one of the last postcard that you show us with the caricature of the soldier and the guy
Yes.
in the tunnel. I assume that's some modern postcard.
Very modern, very modern. But basically, the idea is I want to show that even in my exhibit, I want to show that although it happened 100 years ago, it's still going on because that Jewish stereotype still exists. And I'm trying to show it that it's only for my exhibit, it'll only be one page because basically I don't want to overdo it. It's not to get into that, but if you look into, I quite often look at Arab newspapers, and you can see that when they do the Jewish soldier, whatever, you see the same stereotype. Because if you do, many Israelis are from Middle Eastern countries, and sometimes you can't. Some people you can't say, okay, they're from Yemen, are they Jewish, not Jewish, or whatever. And so they distinguish it. They say, okay, if you've got the long nose, the beard, and the head, the headlock, the yarmulke, you're Jewish. So they're trying to use that stereotype to show it's definitely Jewish. So yes, it's still going on. Unfortunately, the Arab postcards for me are very, very difficult to come by. Mm-hmm. I'm 100% sure there's a lot more out there, but it requires going to those countries, and I'm unfortunately not allowed to.
On that matter, that was my other question. That one, where was it printed? That one that you.
Algeria.
Algeria. Okay.
Yeah. There's some printed in Algeria. There's some printed in Bahrain. Strangely enough, even the Palestinian Authority had all the stamps printed in Bahrain. Mm-hmm. But when Bahrain signed the Abrahamic Accords, they stopped all printing in Bahrain. They were getting it paid free of charge in Bahrain, mm-hmm. and they cut off all ties with Bahrain for that, and they started printing them themselves for money, of course. But they were printed in various countries.
I see. Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments?
So Lawrence, when I go to gas and I find a dealer that has postcards, and I've done this at a couple other shows for you, but I don't really know what to ask them. Like, you can't really say, do you have postcards with Jewish stereotypes? They don't really know, they don't have them organized like that. So
no, but some of them do have a postcard called Judaica. And sometimes it does appear on Judaica. When you know that something's very, very, the nose and that kind of thing, it will fall under Judaica. And actually, when I look on it and some of the sites, I can go to Judaica and I can find these kind of postcards. But that's the only thing that they can have. The ones that I did show you with the restricted, you only know that by research.
Yeah. And you probably have to go to the specific town, county or city or whatever, right? And just basically. And the case I sent you, it's basically New York, so there's a lot of postcards from there. Yeah.
But those are, you can show people pictures and they say, oh, I know that, and it should be in that box. Have a look.
Sometimes they might have like cartoons or caricatures or something, and maybe you could find some in there too.
Good luck. Thanks for trying.
Okay, anyone else? Hey,
I have a question, please.
Yes, go ahead, Jorge. Go ahead, Jorge.
Hello, Lawrence. Very interesting, picturesque postcard collection. I have a question for you. Why the stereotype on the pictures? My family from back Europe, they were also Jews. My granddad was Jews. When they came to the States, and then my granddad moved down to Mexico. I don't know what happened with him, but he died before I was born. But he had not this stereotype, you see, although he was from Central Europe, from today Czech Republic.
That it's hard to know why people look at that, but I've actually never met a Jew who has horns on his head. There are many Jews. I'll give you another curious. When I worked in South Africa. I went from Israel to South Africa in 1999 to work to increase to start up a support mechanism, and I saw there a lady, and I had an eye on the lady, and my boss turned to me and said to me, "You like that hook nose, don't you?" I was not looking at her hooked nose. I was not looking at her nose. I was looking at something else totally. So basically, it's something that people have in their minds that Jews have these hooked noses.
Characteristics, yeah.
But there are Jews that do. There are Jews in Israel that have those. There are Jews in America that do that. There are people who do that. But you know what? With everything, you cannot generalize. You cannot generalize. You cannot say that all Jews have this and all Jews have that. And so people are taking one ugly characteristic and making it wide.
Right.
If you have a look at Barbara Streisand, for example, Barbara Streisand has a very big nose. And at one stage, somebody said to her, why don't you have a nose job? And she said, it's part of who I am. People recognize me with my nose. It's who I am. And she refused to have it done. So people have that. You can't say that every Jew has this, every Jew has that. It's like even with human beings. Some people are right-handed, some people are left-handed. Why is it like that? Looks are everything. So you can say, but you know, when you ask why people would do those kind of postcards, some people are trying to be funny. They're trying to make the postcard look funny in order for people to buy the postcard. They want to have something that sells. And if you do a picture with a person with a huge nose, it's going to sell. If you show a picture of houses and whatever, and you show a picture of a person with a large nose, you're going to buy the one with the large nose.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it sells. It's marketing.
Yeah, and it's a kind of stereotype, you see, also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are stereotypes. You know, there's the crooked back. Why how that came up, I don't know, but it is stereotype from Eastern Europe. Distorted bodies, I don't know how that started, but is a stereotype.
Yeah. Thank you. I understand.
My pleasure.
Okay, any other question or comment? David,
Lawrence, how
Yes,
are you,
Mr.
Lawrence?
Bourne. I'm very well,
I
Mr.
only
Bourne.
want-
How are you?
Manishma,
Muy bien. ¿Y tú?
bien, gracias. I only wanted to say hello to you.
Hello to you too.
It looks
didn't know
David is driving, you see.
Yes, he's driving.
No, I was doing tourist sightseeing with Juan Pablo Aguilar in Mexico City.
Yeah.
Nice
Very
to see
nice,
you,
very
Lawrence.
Nice to see you as well. Is he joining us, Pablo? Juan Pablo.
No,
gone.
he's going to the airport to take a flight to Cancun.
Okay.
Saludos, Jorge.
Saludos, David. Cuídate.
anyone else? I don't see any hands up in that case.
Lawrence, no,
There,
Mauricio,
Igor,
just
perfect.
one second. Yeah.
Hi, Igor. Go ahead,
Lawrence,
Igor.
I just wanted to congratulate you on the great presentation and thank you also for that. A lot of information I did not know, and for sure I'll take a look again at the recording later. A lot of things that we actually can use not only in a postcard collection and a postcard exhibit, but also try to use those a lot of comments and the way you use them in a thematic collection. So thank you for that.
Just remember one thing that in a thematic collection, you cannot use these postcards.
I don't mean for exhibit. I don't mean for exhibit. I just mean for my personal collection.
Yeah.
It was interesting how you used it. Thank you.
My postcard exhibit will be thematic. This is basically how I arranged it, and I believe it's interesting. I don't think anybody's done something like this yet, and it's been a lot of fun.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Lawrence, another question regarding those postcards with the JA and AA printer. The ones that you have seen, have they been mailed around the same area? That could indicate maybe where that printer was located, like to where to do the research, hopefully finding who that printer was, or have they been mailed all around the place?
I don't have that many. I've only got about 3 of them. I'll have to check. It's a good idea to check. There is a website that has other sites like that. That's printed. Don't print a lot of them. But I'll have a look. Thank you for the tip. I'll try it. I'll try and look at it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments for Lawrence? I don't see any hands up. In that case, once again, Lawrence, thank you very much for the presentation.
Gracias a todos.
Okay.